Hey everybody, Captain Gonzo with that Flight Sim channel. Thank you for tuning to our channel once again, and today we will be covering a heavily misunderstood subject here, and that is the difference between turboprop aircraft and piston-engined aircraft. I've seen a lot of comments on some of our videos, and I've been browsing through forums and various websites for Flight Simulator. And some people don't have an understanding of the controls behind a turboprop, such as the TBM 930 or even the Grand Caravan Cessna 208. So that's fine, guys. I get it. Trust me, there's a lot to learn, but I promise you it is a lot easier than you guys think. And so the reason we're making this video is to address that common question or set of questions that we're seeing, both Captain Flako and myself. So we were talking, and Flako was like, hey man, why don't we put a video together where we kind of start addressing the key points that show you the differences between a turboprop and a piston engine. And I said, you know what, that's a great idea. So we were talking, we came up with a quick script, and keep in mind, this is purely for simulation information only, okay? So nothing that I say, albeit should be pretty accurate and close to real life, should never be taken for real world purposes. This is specifically for us in the flight simulator community, and for those of you looking to transfer from a piston engine aircraft such as a Cessna 172 over to a turboprop like the PC-12 or the Cessna 208 Grand Caravan. So guys, let's just start covering some of the key differences between a turboprop and a piston engine. So if you drive or know somebody that drives, or you're around anywhere with motor vehicles, piston engine aircraft are going to be very similar to the engines found in most vehicles. Now, let's exclude Teslas and all the other electronic vehicles like the Rivians and insert names here. All right, we're focusing on internal combustion engines only, right? And so looking at the engine types themselves, a turboprop aircraft, or its engine, is using a turbine engine that drives a propeller. So that turbine engine is generating power by burning fuel and converts it into a rotational energy, which then turns the propeller. Whereas in a piston engine aircraft, it is using a reciprocating piston engine. So you have typically a flat 4 or horizontal 4 engine, which means you've got 4 cylinders and you've got 4 pistons horizontally opposed, and what they're doing is, in similar fashion to a car engine, the fuel is ignited within the cylinders, and the resulting combustion, that energy, that explosion practically, moves the pistons that then turn a crankshaft connected to a propeller. Secondly, we're going to look at the fuel efficiency. Turboprops are more efficient than piston engines at higher altitudes and faster speeds, particularly in the ranges of somewhere in the 250 to 350 knots. Turboprops are more fuel efficient than piston engines at these altitudes due to the better performance of turbine engines at higher speeds. In contrast, the piston engine aircraft are actually sometimes more fuel efficient at lower altitudes and slower speeds. They are often preferred for short regional flights or slower operations because of the lower cost of operation. Makes sense, right? Turboprop engines, you have a turbine, a lot of moving parts, a lot of expensive parts, and so therefore sometimes the piston engine aircraft is the better choice depending on your mission set. That's why you don't see a lot of flight schools right off the bat offering you to learn on a Grand Caravan or a PC-12. It just wouldn't be too cost effective, would it? Also, looking at the performance at different altitudes. As you guys may already know, turboprop aircraft are better suited for higher altitudes, as these turbine engines maintain power and efficiency at altitudes where piston engines may struggle with decreasing air density. Remember, the higher up you go in altitude, the less air density there is. And remember that combustion happens with a mixture of fuel and air. And so the less air there is, the less combustion there is for an engine, relatively speaking. So, in a piston engine aircraft, they are less effective at high altitudes because as altitude increases, like I said, the air density decreases, reducing the efficiency of the engine's power output. So, another factor to consider. What altitudes are you going to be flying at? What kind of missions are you doing? Consider that, guys. Moving on, Power to weight ratio. Turbine engines generally have a better power to weight ratio compared to piston engines, allowing for better performance in terms of climb rate and overall speed at higher altitudes. Piston engines typically have a lower power to weight ratio, which can result in slower climb rates and lower maximum speeds compared to turboprops. Now, you do have some piston aircraft that are turbocharged, such as the Cirrus SR22 GTS, which is using that 540 engine. I forgot who makes it. I gotta Google that real quick, but we'll figure it out together. You also have turbo arrows. You have the Cessna T182, which is the turbo 6-cylinder. So there are options there to improve the performance and efficiency of piston engine. Complexity and maintenance. Turbine engines are generally more complex, but they often require less frequent maintenance than piston engines, and they are known for having longer lifespans with fewer mechanical issues. Piston engines are simpler mechanically, but often require more frequent maintenance, including more regular checks on components like spark plugs, cylinders, and valves. Sounds familiar to a lot of car engines, doesn't it? Just to make a point here, remember, turboprop aircraft run on jet fuel. Jet A1, Jet A. If you're a military customer, you're using one JP8 and JP whatever number the DoD designates, whereas piston engine aircraft typically run on 100 low lead, or 100, which is a green colored for the 100, and the 100 low lead has a light baby blue kind of skyish color to it. Lastly, we're looking at use cases. Turboprop aircraft are commonly used for regional airliners, military transport, and some commercial air services that require efficient operation at medium altitudes and distances. Piston engine aircraft are often used for smaller general aviation aircraft, private planes, flight training, and recreational flying due to their lower operating costs and simpler design. So in summary, the choice between a turboprop and a piston aircraft really depends largely on the intended use, the range, altitude, and operational requirements. Turboprops excel at the mid-range commercial and military operations, while piston engines are generally preferred for short-range, cost-effective, personal flying. So guys, this might be a little boring, I know, I'm sorry. I want to get to the nitty-gritty and show you how we manipulate controls in the simulator, but I wanted to break it down with some very important factors that Captain Flako and I kind of discussed, and we figured that these factors are probably what you guys are considering when making those purchases in the career mode in Flight Simulator 2024. So again, I believe that these factors should be most of them, if not all. And I promised you when I recorded this voiceover, I actually had way many more factors, but then I realized that I was kind of going on tangents and speaking more towards real-world applications, which again, it is not the intended purpose of this video. Another note to make is that this is not a tutorial series by any chance, or by any means, and I promise you we're still working on those tutorials on the side, and you will see them coming out in the next coming weeks. But we wanted to break it down, starting first with these factors that you should consider when making those plane purchases for your career mode. And there's a lot of stuff that I might have missed. Again, the intended audience for this video is for those brand new simmers that have no idea what a turboprop engine is or a piston engine is. And so we're just trying to spread the knowledge as easy and as basic as we can make it. And you guys will see that we get a little more technical now as we jump into the cockpit of several different planes in the simulator. And we're going to show you some very basic steps, how to power them on, how to manipulate those controls, and what they are there for with respect to the aircraft that you see on the video. So here we go, guys. Let's jump right in. All right, guys. So here we are inside Flight Simulator 2024. And as you can see, we are in what is arguably the most common and favored piston-engined aircraft trainer in the world. They've got thousands upon thousands of units manufactured, produced, and delivered since the late or mid 1950s, and this is one of their latest iterations, the Cessna 172 SP, the Skyhawk. So right off the bat, we obviously know this is a piston-engined aircraft. Like I said, very similar to most combustion engines found in ground vehicles. You've got components such as the alternator. You've got horizontally opposed cylinders. and pistons. And so it works very similar to a vehicle. Now, let me show you something right off the bat that makes the Cessna 172 stand out against other aircraft. So if you've been flying turboprops lately and you're still kind of figure yourself around and figure out what's what, you can right off the bat see that we're missing a handle here, right? Which is that blue, baby blue colored handle that you can find on some piston engine aircraft, and you find them, if not on all, on most turbine or turboprop engines. So why is that? Well, let's start off by going outside again. When you look at your propeller on this particular example, the Cessna 172 SP, it has a fixed pitch propeller. So as the name implies, the pitch on that blade stays the same. You can't adjust it. Therefore, you don't have any controls in the cockpit to adjust it. All we have is the throttle, which is right here. I've got it mapped. And you've got your mixture. So what does the throttle do? Well, the throttle controls your RPM, or your revolutions per minute, which then converts that into a power output. So the more power you give the aircraft, the more speed you're going to pick up. The mixture, it's what controls the mixture of fuel and air. And you might have heard the term before, fuel or air to fuel ratio, fuel to air ratio, however you say it. That's exactly what you're doing, right? So right now that we've got the mixture all the way back, it is lean. So we say lean because as you start to lean the mixture, you reduce the amount of fuel, in this case 100 low lead or avgas, that is introduced into your combustion chambers inside the cylinder heads. Rich means that you've got a richer mixture, meaning you're providing maximum fuel flow to that combustion chamber and maximizing power output, which is typically what you need for a good takeoff, as well as when you're setting up for an approach and a landing, to make sure that you have the engine available to produce the most power in case you have to execute a missed approach or a go-around. So, again, your throttle controls the throttle, obviously, and your mixture is where you can control and manipulate that mixture of air to fuel. Pushed in, full rich, and as you bring it back, that is called leaning the mixture. However, be careful when you're in flight. You do not want to pull the mixture all the way back, because if you do that, you are going to starve your engine of fuel, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to turn into a glider. So, let's go through the startup procedure really quick and show you how we do it here. This is not a tutorial. This is just a quick demonstration of how we do this. Beacon is on, fuel pump is on, fuel selector set to both. Make sure your fuel shutoff valve is pushed in. Otherwise, even if you have your mixture full rich, but this is pulled out, you are not allowing the fuel to be introduced to the engine. So bring it in. Let's go ahead and open that throttle about a 1/4 inch. Let's throw that fuel pump off and let's start the aircraft. And as the engine starts to turn over a few times, you'll slowly introduce the mixture and set it to full rich. There we go. Now let's use the throttle to bring the RPM to 1,000. Now look at what happens if I start to lean the mixture here on the ground. Look at your RPM slowly kind of coming down there. Why is that happening? Well, you're slowly choking or leaning the mixture and you're removing more fuel from that combustion. If you put it back to rich, we're back to that idle. So let's see what happens if we pull the mixture all the way back. You just starved your engine. So there you have it, guys. This is a quick demo. Now we're going to jump into something a little bit more advanced that includes a constant speed propeller as opposed to this fixed pitch propeller. Okay guys, so here we are in the Cessna 172's big brother, the 182, the Skylane. In this instance, this is a turbocharged 182. So in this airplane, you still have a piston engine. However, you have a few different things here. As opposed to the Cessna 172 SP that we just saw, you do have what's known as constant speed propellers. So what does that mean? Well, when you jump in the cockpit, you'll see that we now have an additional handle. There it is, that blue handle that we just mentioned earlier. So let's break it down. Similarly, like your 172 and other basic piston engine aircraft, you have your throttle and your mixture. These do not change in function whatsoever. However, you do have the propeller handle, that baby blue handle. I've got it mapped similarly. So what is the purpose of that? Well, it's pretty simple, guys. Without getting too into the weeds of it, a constant speed propeller is a propeller that automatically adjusts its blade pitch to maintain a constant RPM. So when it comes to these more advanced aircraft, you use your throttle to control your manifold pressure, and then your propeller here, this blue handle, will control the RPM of the engine. And so what happens is, as you adjust that blue lever, these props will actually change in pitch to try to maintain that RPM setting that you desire. So let's go over the startup and let's take a look at how we do this in a aircraft that has a constant speed propeller. So similarly, we'll throw the master switch on. That is a lot louder than I thought. Let's get our beacon light on. Let's throw the fuel pump. Once again, we're going to verify that we have the fuel tanks selected in both. Turn that annoying fuel pump off. Here you've got cowling flaps. So these are the small flaps found outside underneath the engine. There it is. You can see that it is open. Pretty much what these are for is for high power and low speed conditions where the engine is running hotter. You open them up, such as takeoff and as you're setting up for your approach, descent, and landing. And it allows the engine to breathe better and get rid of all that heat. So we'll keep the cowl flaps open, fuel selected. Now, here's the fun part. As opposed to a fixed pitch aircraft, such as the 172, you actually want to start your engine by having your mixture full rich and your propeller all the way forward. So why are we setting the propeller full forward and the mixture full rich? Well, for these engines that are a little bit more complicated, you want to have the pitch of that blade, the angle, be as low as possible and offer the highest RPM possible for startup, takeoff, and conditions where you need the highest output. So let's go ahead and go inside and let's start this baby up. All we got to do, turn the ignition over. And there we go. And because we're on the G1000, you can see we have our digital readouts here. So I'm only adjusting my throttle right now. And look at what's happening. Because I have the propeller handle all the way forward, RPM is slowly rising as I increase power. But I am manipulating the manifold pressure. If I start to mess around with the propeller handle, look what happens. There goes the RPM. And now we use our mixture, red knob, to lean the mixture. So look at your fuel flow here, and let's see if we get any changes. You see that? Look at that slider moving up and down. So this is going full rich, and this is going lean. So we're, again, reducing the air to fuel mixture, or the ratio. But be careful, because once again, look what happens when we drop that. We just start the engine once again. Now, let's jump into a turboprop aircraft and let's see what are the differences. All right, guys, here we are in the Grand Caravan. I didn't even realize I chose the amphibious model, but it's okay. We've got the gear deployed, so we're all good. So right off the bat, you guys should know this by now. The Cessna C208B Grand Caravan is a turboprop aircraft. So in layman's terms, this is the Cessna 172 and the 182 on steroids, bigger wings, bigger fuselage, greater payload, with an even more powerful and insanely popular engine known as the Pratt & Whitney PT6. So there are a few similarities to the constant speed propeller 182 turbo that we just looked at. However, this is an entirely different monster and one that you guys have been asking about. So let's jump right into the cockpit and let's start taking a look. Now, again, guys, this is purely for entertainment and information only. For those of you that are real-world turboprop operators and even AMP mechanics, Don't kill us. We might forget a thing or two. We might say something a little off. We're trying to make this as simple as possible for our community of simmers, specifically the newer generation that have zero or little experience in Flight Simulator. So guys, right off the bat, we can take a look and you can see the similarities, right? We've got the closest lever to the pilot side, which is your power lever. Don't call it the throttle lever. Otherwise, turboprop aircraft will start crashing and disappearing from the skies. I'm just kidding. But seriously, this is your power lever. In the middle, that baby blue, you've got your propeller lever. And lastly, to the right, we've got a condition lever. So let's start with the power lever. So what does the power lever do and what does it control? Well, pretty simple, right? It controls your engine power. Now, I can dive a little deeper in another video, but you've got what's known as your alpha range, which is this range right here between max power and idle power. You've got beta, which is just underneath your idle. And then you've got full aft, which is your reverse, which is all the way down here. Reverse is pretty straightforward, isn't it? You put your power setting to reverse, helps the aircraft slow down. But we'll leave that for another day. Let's just focus on this lever. So, again, like I said, alpha and beta ranges. In quick, simple terms, your beta is the range where the power level controls the fuel schedule and the blade angle of the propeller. However, in alpha range, right here, which is between idle and max power, the power lever controls the gas generator speed. And we'll now jump over to the propeller lever. So remember, power is for your engine power. Pretty straightforward, right? You want more go? Give it more gas, give it more fuel, or give it more power. All right, the propeller lever. So very similar to what we saw on the 182 with that constant speed propeller. So all the way aft, let me go ahead and put it here. You can see it says feather. What does the feather mean? Well, what you're doing is you are changing the pitch of those blades to be parallel to your direction of flight. So right now the engine is powered off. We don't have any control whatsoever. But what happens is, especially in an engine failure, you want to reduce the drag that the engine is producing or those propeller blades are producing, right? So if you've got a multi-engine turboprop and let's say your number 2 has failed, after you shut off the fuel and gone through the checklists, usually you will find somewhere in that checklist a command to throw it into feather. And what that does, once again, it sets the angle of that prop blade to be parallel to the direction of flight, so it reduces the drag that that blade is producing. Let's go ahead and go back into our minimum. So again, the prop lever will be controlling the speed of the propeller. Pretty easy, right? So if you got it on minimum, you're going to have it at the lowest RPM setting. If you've got it full forward, you've got the maximum RPM. Now let's go to the right and look at the condition lever. So this is in some ways similar to that mixture on your piston engine aircraft. However, it's even easier, guys. So what is the condition lever overall? Practically speaking, it's just an on-off valve for fuel. That's it. Now, in the earlier days of turboprop aircraft, they typically had just one setting. It was cut off, which means your fuel is off, and on. So in this case, I think I have it mapped here incorrectly. Yep, I have to change my controls, but that's all it is. It's telling the engine you're going to get some fuel or you're not going to get some fuel. And so what happened is, in the earlier models of turboprop aircraft, I think pilots were having issues on the ground where they would have it on the on condition, and they would start turning on AC and generators and all kinds of electrical equipment that was drawing power, and the aircraft would stall. So what happened? Well, manufacturers like Pratt & Whitney introduced a low idle and a high idle. So again, I apologize, I don't have it mapped right now properly. Actually, let me just do the quick swap here. There we go. I've got it mapped again. Sorry, guys. So I'm going to show you what happens. So we're in the cutoff position, so there is no fuel being introduced into the engine right now. So let's bring it up to the first bump, which is the low idle. So where would you want to use this? Well, after starting up, you would typically keep it in the low idle for ground operations, because once you set it to high idle, you are physically drawing more power, you're introducing more fuel, and so the engine will operate at more power, higher speeds, etc. So what you typically see in turboprop aircraft is ground operations are done in the low idle, and then shortly before flight, you throw it in the high idle, and you don't touch it again until you're on the ground. And again, guys, if you're pros at this and this is incorrect, go ahead and correct me and drop a comment below and let me know that that is false. So, layman's terms, power is your power for the engine, and this is your alpha range, and here's your beta, just underneath the idle, between idle and reverse. Propeller lever will control the propeller speed, so lower, less RPM, higher, more RPM. And your condition lever, for layman's terms, it's just a pretty much big old handle that's akin to a fuel valve. Cutoff is off. Sorry, wrong one. Low idle, you're turning the gas on. High idle, can't speak. More gas. Make sense? All right, well, now let's get ready to fire this thing up and see how we do it. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and get set up for a startup in the Grand Caravan. This is not a full tutorial by any means. It's going to be very quick, very rough. If you want to check out the tutorial that we put out here recently, feel free to check it out. I'll link it in the description as well as provide it on the video. So let's make sure we've got the fuel selectors on for left and right. Let's go ahead and set the propeller lever all the way forward. Well, why is that? Well, when you're starting a turboprop engine, you want to make sure that the engine starts up with the least amount of torque necessary and max RPM. And then we're going to show you how we manipulate the condition lever as the starter is engaged and that engine starts to turn. So here we go. Let's get the battery on, get our avionics on. We'll keep the ignition on normal. We'll set the fuel boost to on. And let's go ahead and start that starter. You can hear it. Let's keep an eye out on our PSI for the oil. Look at your NG and your prop RPM steadily climbing. Once we see about 12% NG, there we go. You're going to throw your condition lever to the low idle. Here we go. Remember, that's your fuel on and off. Look what's happening. Now the fuel's being introduced. Engine is coming to life. And once we see NG in the green, we can turn that starter back off to norm. There we go. Starter is off. And that's it. You've just powered on a PT6. Now let's observe what happens when I throw that condition lever to the high idle. Here we go. You can see torque is increasing, ITT is increasing, as well as your RPM. Now let's manipulate the power lever. So this is the alpha range. Look at your torque. You're producing more power. Pretty straightforward, right? Let's go to idle. Makes sense, right? More power. More power. Pretty straightforward. Now let's go into that beta range and see what happens. So you can see there, your prop RPM is decreasing, torque is decreasing. Let's go back to idle. And that does it, guys. So remember, if you're going to be in ground operations, I recommend keeping it on low idle. It's a lot easier to control the aircraft. You won't be taxiing at Southwest Airlines speeds, which you know I love to do. And guys, I hope this serves to help you with very basic understandings of how a turboprop aircraft differs to a piston engine aircraft. I hope that the example of the 182 turbo helps you understand a little better the transition from a simple piston engine like the 172 we saw to what you typically find on single engine turboprops. Now, obviously, there's other options. You've got the 408, which is that Sky Courier twin engine turboprop that has a bit of different controls there. more advanced, more modern aircraft. So we won't dive into that, and we didn't cover that in this video because, again, we figured most of you guys out there in the career mode are typically choosing the Caravan, the Pilatus PC-12, and the TBM 930 as your initial turboprop aircraft. So I hope this video helps you in any way. If it didn't, seriously, let us know, guys. We're trying to make this as easy and as simple to understand as we possibly can. So if we missed out on some more information that you were looking forward to, drop it in the comments. And I promise you, we're going to work tirelessly to get the information out there and help us all learn together. We're not professionals, we're not experts, I promise you that. And I am constantly reading and learning about the material that I am trying to teach. So take everything with an extra grain of salt and do your own research, check other videos. But we hope to be that one channel that gives you a little bit of everything: entertainment, knowledge transfer, tutorials, and etc. So alright guys, I'm going to cut it here. This video went on a little bit longer than I wanted it to, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So this is Captain Gonzo with that Flight Sim channel, wishing you guys all smooth landings and happy flying. See you guys.